economic driver of any economy is the viability of small businesses. I don't have to tell you that. It helps to drive innovation, spur curiosity, and provide a sense of financial security for millions of people. And for our friends north of the border in Canada, the true gauge of the health and wellness of our economy is our small and medium-sized businesses at large. According to Statistics Canada, businesses with 1 to 99 employees comprised 98% of all employer businesses in the country in 2022. Furthermore, small and medium-sized businesses employed approximately 10.7 million individuals last year, which accounts for almost 2/3 or 63% of all employees across the country. Calan Breckon is an online business coach and consultant who teaches entrepreneurs, influencers, and business owners teachable action steps which increase their profits for setting up and maintaining a profitable online business, while guiding them on how to map it all out and manage it in manageable steps. Bracken brings enthusiasm and energy when interacting with others, which is unmatched and helps him to stand out among one of the crowdest fields in all of entrepreneurship, coaching. And he joined me this week to reveal a bit of his secret sauce on how he gets that very job done. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'm excited to engage in conversation with you. So, Callan, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm all excited to talk to you about business growth online, my friend. Great to see you this morning or this afternoon. And thank you so very much for being here, my friend.
Awesome. I'm excited. Ready to go.
Absolutely. So, Callan, I wanted to start by giving you a chance to I guess humanize yourself and give me your story in business and in life, because I know you say that your business grew when you had a chance to do the same. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me who you are, where you come from, and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
I can definitely do that for you. All right, perfect. So, hello, everybody. I'm Calan Breckon. I am currently in Toronto, Canada, where I live. I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, but I've lived all over the world, many different places. I've lived in 5 major international cities. I'm a business coach and consultant, and my big focus is in website development and SEO. And I also like to teach people about creating online courses, memberships, and how to use a podcast to drive your SEO traffic and grow your podcast and grow your website or online business. So that's who I am. That's what I do. A little quick backstory of why I started my business is I have a very physical medical condition that kind of stopped me from going out. It's been about 10 years now. And it got really bad at about the 6-year mark, and I had to resign at my job where I was. I was positioned over in Dubai for 5 years, and I had to come back to Canada. And so it kind of forced me to stay inside, and I couldn't really leave a lot. And so I had to create a position for myself, and this was before the pandemic. So create a position to work from home for myself, and I was a really bad employee. Not bad employee, I was a great employee actually, but I really hate inefficiencies. And in big companies, I just always saw all the inefficiencies. And when you tried to fix something, they would just be like, oh, yeah, that's nice. And they would never actually do anything about it. So that's kind of what really pushed me and drove me into creating my own business to help people just kind of be successful in life for themselves. I love efficiency, but I love efficiency with the purpose of creating a life that is more well-rounded for the individual and giving that person more space to breathe. Whereas in a lot of big corporations, I see they use efficiency to just generate more money, but not actually give people more time off or pay people more. So I decided to do that for myself and, help people also do that for themselves so that we can kind of create a more efficient but enjoyable life to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Callan, we had the good pleasure of meeting a couple of weeks ago when we both attended a business summit, and the first thing I noticed about you, buddy, is your energy and enthusiasm for the work that you do and for life in general. So tell me why you think you have an abundance of enthusiasm and sort of the competitive advantage it gives you to be so enthusiastic for life and in business, my friend.
Well, thank you. I think that it comes from kind of this forced necessary need, because I know what it's like to be so limited in what I can do and being able to go. And actually, when we met at the summit, at the CGLCC summit, it was the first kind of big event I was able to go out to. I did kind of hit a milestone with my doctors, and things have significantly improved. Not cured, not fixed, but majorly improved. And that had only happened maybe about 3 weeks before that summit actually happened. So you probably just recognize that I was in really high spirits because I was able to be out. I was able to be around people. I was able to be out of my apartment for a long extended period of time over a number of days, and being able to eat food and feel safe and comfortable, that like I wasn't going to get stuck in my room or in an uncomfortable position where I had to leave. And so being able to do that really made me very excited just to be around people again and to kind of feel like I was back in my old life before all of my issues and all of my problems started to happen. So that's one reason why I have so much enthusiasm, and also just being around the people there. I've gone through many journeys in my kind of business. Before I do what I do now, I was in a business partnership with a company and a podcast called Gay Men Going Deeper. We're still very good friends. I still love both of them. Matt and Michael were my business partners, and we grew a podcast about personal development, mental health, sexuality for gay men, and just a company based around that. And I really loved doing a lot of that work, and that work taught me and informed what I do now. And by going through that journey, it allowed me to kind of become more enthusiastic, because I was always the tech nerd building all this stuff, the website and, the ecosystem for how to actually create an online business and the podcast and everything else. That going through that journey aligned me to where I am today to be able to be in business. And then going to the summit was like, oh, these are my people. There are other, like business nerds and amazing people who want to do things for the world and shake things up and make things happen. And it just kind of felt like it all clicked. So I was definitely full of a lot of enthusiasm when I was at the summit when we met.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And now your day job entails you working with entrepreneurs, influencers, and other business owners to teach them the fundamentals of online business. So I'm wondering if you can tell me all about your day job as well.
Yeah, so I love that you asked this, because I have a motto that I've implemented called "Build on Boring." I'm very boring in what I like to teach people, but It's so simple, it's silly. A lot of people get very finicky or nervous or scared about like online or technology or how to use things. And I kind of like to break it down into the basics and help people understand them. So for me personally, I work in web development, in the importance of SEO, which is search engine optimization, and email marketing, as well as podcasting for SEO. And so what it is basically is if you have a business or you have an idea and you have a plan, like you want to create an online course or you want to create an online membership, or you want to start a podcast, or you want to start a blog, or you want to start making money online, but you don't know how to do that exactly. I help people figure that out the best way that's going to work for their business. So taking yourself, for example, Kevin, you have this amazing podcast. There's lots of things that you could do to improve the rate at which people watch your podcast or listen to your podcast. I know that you have it on YouTube, but you also can have it on all the podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all these different places. And if you were to do it the way that I teach, which is to have a WordPress website and then host your podcast on your website or have it go through, that's going to generate what's called search engine optimization and search keywords through going through your website, so that instead of YouTube getting all your traffic or somewhere else getting your traffic, your website starts to get all of your traffic, and then more people get to find out about you. And by including things like downloading your transcript and uploading that onto that same post, Google's going to be able to find all the keywords that you use. And the more you use them, the more Google's going to be like, oh, this person knows all about this. When somebody searches this specific topic on Google, send them to that website. And, this is a very, basic level version of it. But what happens is if you want to become successful or popular, you want people to know about your brand, or you want to get your message out there, you want Google to be your best friend, and you want Google to be able to recommend you as the number 1, 2, or 3, ideally the number 1 spot. But that's what I work with people to do. I help them get into that number 1 spot. I help them get their message out there more. And it also ends up saving them a lot of money on advertising, because instead of advertising, Google is recommending you because it's told, oh, you're the number 1 source when it comes to this individual thing.
Life on Google is so much easier when you know how to do it effectively, isn't it?
Exactly. So that's what I help people with. I help set up their ecosystems in the tech. So what I just said sounds kind of big and scary, but what I do is I work with people either one-on-one, or they, hire me to do a project, and I set this all up for them, and then I teach them how to do it themselves. So it's just about the upkeep, and it keeps things super simple and super easy for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Calan, one of the reasons I was so excited that you accepted my invitation, buddy, is that I believe that we share the same synergy when it comes to promoting inclusion, equity, and diversity for all people. As you know, buddy, I was born with a cerebral palsy, and you're big into the LGBTQ community. So tell me about the sense of building inclusion and acceptance for all people, and sort of the competitive advantage that brings you in business when you're more inclusive and accepting, my friend.
Well, I can throw out all the stats. I'll throw out a quick stat that you actually heard because you were at the summit. The LGBTQ community, specifically in Canada, employs almost over 500,000 Canadians, and it generates over 22 billion with a B billion dollars in revenue for the economy. So it's not like it's a small little number. It's a large number, the LGBTQ community, for the economic growth of the country. But on top of that, there's so many reasons why somebody would want to include diversity. In my head, it's kind of just like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just involve everybody, no matter where they come from, what walk of life they have? Because that knowledge that that individual brings is going to be different than yours, and their journey is just as valid and important, and all, maybe sometimes more important, because the specific people who have been sitting at the top for a long time have been sitting at the top. They know what they know, but they create these little ecosystems around them where they kind of just create an echo chamber of them talking to themselves because everybody has the same ideas. But when you include other people who have different backgrounds and different walks of life, it adds variety into that. And it also is just more representative of the world we have around us. The world is only going to continue growing and continue changing and continue evolving. LGBTQ people aren't going anywhere. We've always been here. We're more visible now, but that's because now we're saying, hey, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired and treated like crap. We're going to stand up and we're going to actually fight for what we want. And it's just fear that holds people back from kind of letting themselves go on that journey and experience what that's like to really diversify themselves, diversify their business. And I think a lot of it can kind of come down back to, we have big egos as human beings, and we like to be right. And in business specifically, people don't like to appear wrong or like they don't know anything. And they think that that asserts the dominance, or that, people are going to go with their ideas. But what we've learned is that that actually creates very stifling environments for people to grow. And what you really need to grow is you need to have openness. I follow a lot of Brene Brown's teachings of Dare to Lead, where it's, you don't know everything. It's good to ask questions. Here is all about is about learning and growing. Because if you're not doing that and you're all just talking the same talk and you're all just talking in circles about the same thing, what a small experience of life that is for an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And Calan, tell me, buddy, I'm curious to ask you about how your journey in business has helped you sort of evolve as a person, and the greatest lesson you think you've learned since being in business.
Oh, okay. So, what I've learned, well, I learned that I can't do it alone. I used to be very, very lone wolf energy. Just from my past and my history, I come from a very, low economic family. We were very not well off on like welfare, things like that. Parents separated, made things even worse. So I kind of always had a low level thought process of myself. And I always thought I had to do everything alone or for myself or by myself, because just that experience taught me that my parents aren't necessarily always going to be there for me. They tried. I now know as an adult that they tried their best and they did what they could with what they had. But as a child, you don't really think about that. You just think about like, well, why isn't this person showing up for me? Why aren't they protecting me? Why aren't they, taking care of me the way that I think they should? And that just taught me about the world, or my experience about the world, that, nobody takes care of you but you. And so I kind of developed this belief system that I had to take care of me only. Nobody else was going to help me out, which is completely not true. That was just my experience up until that point. And so going into business, specifically going into business with my business partners, really taught me the value of community and working with others, and learning how to trust people in that capacity and leaning on them for support and letting them support you through those tough times. And I also realized it's, you will more often than not do a lot of work for other people because we want to help others. So having those business partners helped me stay on track and help me grow and build faster than I would have done it for myself. And that was a really important learning lesson for me, is because I now know that I can ask people for help. I now know and have the confidence to say, I need assistance here, or I can lean on somebody here. And that things like mentors are super important. And kind of creating that community around yourself is such an important aspect of me developing my business and continued growth of my business, because I could do all I want here on the computer. And I can build a community here, but things like the CGLCC conference, I was just at the Collision conference in Toronto as well, where people actually get to come together. There's just an energy about it. And like you said, when we met in person, there's an energy when you meet people in real life. And that's kind of a lot of the learning lessons I've done over the past recent years of developing my business, is that so much of it comes through community, and that's such an important part to embrace.
Yeah, and just playing off the community part of it for a second, again, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is sometimes it's because of the severity of my disability. I don't get a chance to get out and network as much as I would like, but there are so many technological advances, like we're having this conversation over Zoom, and I wanted to ask you about the importance of building a social capital and relationships as a business owner and someone who advises other entrepreneurs to do the same. So could you tell me about, from your perspective, the value of social capital and building relationships?
Oh, good question. I never really thought about it before when I was kind of doing my lone wolf thing. And then once I started getting into business and realizing that, like, oh, it's important. I'm a very methodical and kind of logical minded person. And so I kind of approach things from like trying to understand them like a scientist. So I was like, well, what is it that's here? And the social capital to me is kind of a basis of like what they call know, like, and trust factor online. And so in order to have a business, what happens is that let's start at the beginning. Say I have something online, like I have an online course, but somebody goes there and they see it and they see the price and like, well, I have no idea who this person is. And they go and they search you on Google, or they go and they search you on socials. And if you don't have a lot going on there, then your social capital is not going to be very good, because people are going to be like, well, I mean, it could be great, but I don't trust this yet. I don't trust this interaction because I've not had that either a personal social interaction with this person, or I've not been recommended by somebody I trust. And recommendations by somebody you trust is still one of the best ways. Word of mouth is still one of the best ways to grow anything and to get any kind of, products sold or services or anything like that. It's like, oh, hey, do you have somebody who did your bathroom? We're going to redo ours. I really like the job that they did. That's a recommendation. That's a referral. And so social capital kind of comes off that fact that, like, human beings are social creatures. We're social beings. So it's natural that we're going to ask the people around us who we trust who did that for them, or if they know of this person, and get their feedback, because that's the security you've built kind of within your group of people. It's like, it's that security blanket. And so that social construct is very important when you're building the know, like, trust factor. It's like me being on your podcast now. We ran into each other in real life. We had real life experiences. You're now having me on your podcast. Your audience who listens or watches is now going to have more of a trust factor with me because of this social connection that's gone on. And you can only do that if you're with other people and if you're engaging with other people. And I think technology like Zoom is so fantastic to help build those bridges and to help connect people who maybe aren't physically able to, or, I'm very introverted. I might not come across as very introverted, but I really love being alone at home by myself. And so for me, it was great to be able to kind of plug in and turn on during the pandemic. And I did group Zooms, and I kind of led those and facilitated those with my previous business. And it was really nice to be able to do that, but then also to kind of then unplug and not run down my social meter, so I could still enjoy building that social community in a way that suited me and what my needs were. So that's kind of a long rounded way of saying social capital is important, but it kind of comes down to the basics of your community and trust and, safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Callan, one of the things that you picked up on about myself is that I love living life and really experiencing all life has to offer. And I truly believe that comes from a sense of developing and cultivating our own sense of passions in life. Outside of this podcast, I like to go swimming, I lift weights, and I go walking a lot because it helps with the disability. It also helps me sort of find my inner center in life. You know, when the walls are caving in on my life, or I'm having a bad day, you know, just going for a walk or lifting weights or going swimming allows me to reconnect with my inner center. So, for you personally, I'm fascinated to ask, how do you sort of reconnect with yourself when everything is sort of caving in on you and you need to sort of reconnect or find your inner self or center? How did you do that from a personal perspective?
Oh yeah, and as being an entrepreneur, it can be very busy sometimes and it can be very exhausting. You can burn yourself out, and I've had to learn not to burn myself out. So the things that I love to do that really feeds my soul is I love to read. I'm a huge reader. I didn't start really reading until I was about 27, 28. And then I found these fantasy books. I only read fantasy. If I'm going to do personal development or something, I'll listen to the audiobooks. I prefer to listen to that. But when I'm reading, I just get to escape to these fantasy worlds. And it just, because the world can be so dark and daunting and exhausting sometimes that I need a little escapism. And so for me, reading like fantasy fiction books is like, oh, mwah, chef's kiss. It's so good. Some of my favorite authors are Sarah J. Maas. She wrote the Throat of Glass series, which was probably my first series I got addicted to. But when the pandemic started, I made a commitment and a promise to myself to really support LGBTQ authors. And so I really focused on finding really good LGBTQ authors. My absolute favorite is Haley Turner. She's got a lot of great series. She has Soulbound is really good, and then the Metahuman Files is my favorite book series. It's R-rated, just for everybody out there. It's not like a kid's book. It's very adult. But it was really important to me to kind of walk my walk and talk my talk. And so because I love fiction so much, I wanted to find authors that I could love and support. And the amount of books that I've read that are just such great quality and great writing, that is even more relevant to me and my existence and my community. The first few times I read, an intimate scene in a book between two men, I got really uncomfortable. And it's because I've been conditioned so long in a heteronormative world that I was like, oh, this is supposed to make me uncomfortable. But then the more I read it, the more I was like, oh no, this, like, everybody does this in fantasy. Like Sarah J. Maas writes sex scenes in her books for straight people, and I've never had an issue reading those. Why do I find it so difficult to read, about my own existence? And I think it's because when you read, you get to have your imagination and you get to almost experience it more. And so it's more personal to you. And going through that was just a revolutionary experience for me. And so I always try and promote LGBTQ authors, because when you read about your experience, and books are miles beyond the Hollywood world. So if you can find books that are about your experience individually, it will change your life. So that's one thing I like to do, is read. I read every night before bed. And I also meditate, not every day, but I've been doing it for a number of years. And I really try and meditate at least like 5 to 10 minutes every night before I read, just to kind of quiet my mind, bring things down, get me into a little bit of more like relax my brain and kind of shut it down for the night, which allows me to enjoy reading a little bit more.
Having inclusive conversations of great consequence is one of the best ways we can learn, grow, and prosper as a people if we listen to others. So I asked Breckon to expand on his definition of building an inclusive culture and what that means to him.
Well, many things. I think, as a general statement overall, it's just, being a good person is, I think if you're just a good person and you revolve your life around, loving thoughts instead of negative or hateful thoughts, that you're going to be an inclusive person. I think the people who have that innate, just genuine being goodness are genuinely inclusive people and want to be inclusive. But then taking it further, taking it further, you need to actually still do the active steps of creating that inclusivity and making active thoughts, instead of just passively being a good person. Being a good person is a great start, and that, that's a great place to start from, but actively taking steps to think about the way that you're interacting with the world, to think about the way that you're interacting with, what's happening around you. Things like, the podcast that I used to host, thinking about the type of people I'm choosing to have on the podcast. Like, am I just interviewing all, hetero or cisgendered gay white guys? Or am I making a point to find people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, to make sure that I'm getting a whole picture when it comes to creating the content that we are creating over there? And, some people might not even have that thought, which that's kind of where, if you're there, that's where you need to start to create that inclusivity. Is you first have to start in your own mind. But me being an aware person of that, I was then making the active steps of being like, okay, now I actually have to put the action to the words. Like, am I making sure to include different people? I did do an episode. I had a panel where I had a couple people on, who had different versions of disabilities, who were also of the LGBTQ community, so that we could have that conversation about what's it like for your experience, what's it like, so that it wasn't just the same thing over and over again on the podcast. And I think that, change and inclusivity is very on top of mind right now, because I think the world's gotten to a place where the pendulum's swinging back and corrections are being made, and that is just going to take a lot of time. And we need to continue to do that work. And then over generations, we're going to see the benefits of that. But to make sure that you have to keep making those steps and doing those active things to make sure the pendulum keeps swinging, so that we can create the more inclusive spaces, but being aware that it's not just today, it's not just tomorrow, it's not just checking a box off the list. It's a lifetime choice you're making, and you're going to see that through the generations of change. We can already see it now with, I think it's Gen Z, so different. And I thought we were progressive. I'm 36. I thought my generation was progressive, and they are miles beyond. So it gives me a lot of hope to be able to see that. And, there's some older generations and old ways of thinking are still very prevalent and around. And that's because people like to stay in their little tiny bubbles, and that's where they feel safe, and that's what they grew up with, and that's what they understand, and that's what they know. And the only way to change that is through exposure and education, which is why visibility is so important, which is why TV shows, Netflix, podcasts, things like this, that it continuously expose people to those experiences, is really important, so that they get that exposure, so that maybe the next generation after them can be the change. But it takes time. But that's what all that means to me: the acceptance and inclusion, and actually doing the work, and not just saying you're doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Actions speak louder than words, for sure. And Calan, we've reached a point in our conversation. I wanted to give you the platform because I know that you're a huge advocate for the LGBTQ community, and as we learned at the summit, and as you know in your personal life, the rights and liberties of your community are under attack, my friend. If we just look at the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision on entrepreneurship and serving people in your community, it seems anyway that we may be turning a page backwards. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how your community can fight through what barriers are now being put up, and how do you define equity and equality for your community, my friend?
Oh my, okay, a couple of big questions. Well, I mean, like I said already, we're here. We've always been here. We're not going away. We're only growing with more love and inclusivity in my mind. It's just social media allows the loud haters to be even louder, even though they're a very small fraction. So for me, it's really important to make sure that people know that I'm part of the LGBTQ community. On my website, at the very bottom on the footer at calanbreckon.com, I have the CGLCC, like my stamp certification, because I'm a diverse certified supplier, which means my business is over 51% owned and operated by a person from the LGBTQ community. And that's really important for me to have. And it's really important for me to have in my marketing and to make people aware, because that visibility, I mean, if you're not going to work with me because of that, you're not my right business people. And that's fine by me, because there's going to be people who are going to be even more attracted to that, because they're going to go, oh, I have two choices, both parts being equal, but here's a community that I want to help support and raise up, who I know has been going through difficult times. I'm going to choose to work with that person. So I know that universally, it's always going to balance out to me. In regard to like what's going on down in the States and all the craziness, look, there's people in power who are trying desperately to hold on to that power because they're afraid of change and they're living their life through fear. And it makes sense, because that's what we're taught a lot as kids. That's what, if you grew up with, that's what they've teach their kids, and then that passes down from generation to generation, and then those people get into power and they make choices that don't serve everybody. It just serves them and their agenda. And they could say the same thing about the LGBTQ community, that we have an agenda, but I mean, we're not organized to that degree. It's just we're here, we're queer, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. And I think that just us keeping our confidence and keep walking, as long as we're walking in the same direction and we just keep going and we focus on love and support, there is times to be angry, there is times to protest, and that's very important. But the overall the long-term vision is to just keep moving and to keep showing people who we are and our values as individuals. And eventually the negativity will begin to fade. And that's where I'll take it back to that generational thing. Change takes generations, and it looks like it's going back. But in my mind, these things never disappeared. The racism that happens, especially all the things that went on down in the States as of recent years, and everything that happened, it wasn't not there. It's always been there. It's just now people are talking about it. And so even though it came about in a very so many feelings, the way that it came about is awful, and all the things that are happening are awful. But in my mind, the opposite of that is that we need to go through these experiences, because we can't heal the darkness unless we go through it, unless we see it. Because if we just pretend it's not there, like we've been doing maybe for the past couple generations, that's not fixing the problem. We have to actually actively talk about it and go through it in order to heal the traumas of all these different communities and all these different types of experiences we've all been through. And I think that that's maybe what my generation, millennials, maybe a little bit younger, has gotten to with therapy and doing the work, is we're talking about it, we're going through it. We need to go through the experience so that we can then move past it and move through it, instead of just hiding it under the rug like older generations, where just we don't talk about that, or men don't cry, and all these kinds of old things and old beliefs that people have. I think that that's shifting. And so even though a lot of this darkness is coming to the surface with laws being passed and all the things happening, it's showing people that it's still there, and that the light is going to get brighter. And the people who are opposed to that, the general population, the majority, are going to start to get louder, and it is going to start a wave of change. But that would have never happened had the catalyst not started it. And so that's kind of what I have to say about that part of it. In regards to like equity and equality, being conscious and aware, like I said before, just being conscious and aware of the choices you make. And like I said before, when you're a person in a place of power, or you have decisions to make, being aware of those decisions that you're making. Like when I was looking for podcast guests, making sure that, okay, if I'm going to have this podcast guest, do I have a balanced around the panel that I'm going to have? Is everybody represented? Is everybody included? Or am I just kind of tunnel visioning to what I feel comfortable with, or what I see as like an easy conversation, because I don't want to have those easy conversations. I don't mind getting messy. I don't mind saying the wrong thing. I don't mind screwing up, because I know that's going to lead me to learning more and to growing more as a person. And I welcome that change. Whereas a lot of people are fearful from that because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look dumb. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to make an ass out of themselves. They don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. But I think if you can create that circle, and create that experience with trusting people, then, maybe you will screw up, but then you can learn together and you can grow together. So equity and equality is kind of just allowing yourself to get into the mess and grow with it and not be afraid of it, and just find the people who are going to help support you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a power in the strength of diversity of perspective, isn't there?
Very much so. I learned so many things, but I was blessed. I grew up in Vancouver, which is a very, very multicultural city. And in my high school, I had so many different cultures and backgrounds that I already as a child grew up with such diversity that, to me, that was the normal. And so I've always had that, and I'm gifted and blessed to have had that experience. But then I've been around people who, they were the only white kid in a very small city, and they never met a person of color until they were like in their 20s. So of course that's going to be a very different experience for them. But if they're willing to learn and grow and actually, learn from that experience and not hold on to that safety bubble of where they grew up, it's going to be a very different experience for them. But that's, each individual person has to make that choice for them. I don't blanket any group or any people. Each individual person makes those choices for themselves.
Yeah, and Kala, going back to putting your business lens on for a second, I know you help people sort of create a vision and a roadmap for their online business success. So tell me about the questions, or sort of what you put on that roadmap once you learn about a business. What are some fundamental sort of keys to constructing a roadmap to success in online business?
Well, it always starts off with what are their objectives and goals. And then also finding out their education around Google and search engine optimization and their understandings of it. And if they have any fundamental understandings of it. Sometimes I have clients that come to me that, they've created an online course, but now they don't know how to put the pieces together. They don't know where to host the course. They don't know how the emails are going to get sent out to the students, and they don't want to send it one by one and all of these other things. So it's kind of taking a snapshot of where they are and where they want to be, and then based upon that, I can help them kind of navigate, okay, this is what we should prioritize, this is what we should prioritize next, these are all the things we can do to start helping you leverage your business or help building what we need to do. And what people need to remember with SEO, it's not just going to be like an overnight. You're not going to see that change happen within a week or 2 weeks. This is months that it takes to really build on that for yourself and your business, because Google has to have time to figure out what your keywords are. It needs to start ranking you. You need to start ranking for more organic keywords. That means you have to start putting out blog posts, or, creating a podcast that goes through your website, and all of these things have to start building together. But I kind of take a snapshot of all that, and then based upon how much knowledge the individual has, I can either fast track because they know mostly about SEO, or I educate them a bit and go, okay, this is where you are. This is what I see being the most significant impact to your business. This is how you can get there. And then we create a map together, deciding what their priorities are and what I see as the business priorities and what's actually going to help them move the needle. Because I am all about efficiency. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste your money. I want to get you from where you are to where you want to be as quickly as possible and in the most sufficient way, which means building out that success so that it's not just one time with me, so that it continues for you over time and you can repeat the process again and again and again, or continue to grow that well into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like putting the puzzle pieces of a puzzle together, right?
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. And Calan, I wanted to ask you about podcasting and the role it helps to grow a business because, if you don't have a book, there's people have podcasts now, but they're a really effective tool to start conversations about business, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, yes. Podcasting is my favorite for so many reasons. Actually, I'm doing a whole series in my email list right now. If people join my email list, I'm doing a whole series about why I love podcasting and why it's so good for your business. But basically, when you have a podcast, so online, everybody's about, social, you need to have content. I hate social media. I'm first and foremost standing out there and saying, I don't like Instagram. I don't like Twitter. I don't like Facebook. Like, I don't like all of these things. I don't love them. But what I do love is I love having conversations, genuine conversations with people and connecting. And for me, I have a interview-based podcasting style like this, where you have guests and you get to talk and you get to connect. And I learn through the conversation and you get to learn through the conversation. And then the listener gets to learn through the conversation. Plus, you're creating content for audio for the podcast and you're creating video for YouTube. So right there, you're already doubling your content, which is fantastic. And podcasts are just on the forefront of kind of the new wave. And I mean, I've been podcasting for over 5 years now, like over all the different podcasts that I've created. But even now, it's still a great time to get in because if you look at blogs, I think there's like an insane amount of blogs out there, so much so that there's one blog for every 7 people in the world. Whereas podcasting, if you do the numbers, there's one podcast for every 1,400 people or something like that. I can't remember what the numbers are. In any case, the podcasts, there's way less podcasts than there is blogs. And so if people go searching online and they don't want to read, podcasting is the next great thing. And you can build a better audience through podcasting because they actually get to hear what you have to say and they get to feel your vibe and your energy. And it's like, how on texting, you can text somebody and you can be like, oh, they're pissed. But then you talk to them like a little bit later and they're like, no, I wasn't. I was just answering, because the context of the vocalization isn't there. Whereas in podcasting, just like on the phone, you can actually hear what the person is saying. And so I think that builds more of a relationship with the individuals. And to use that to then build your business, that's just going to get all these links from all of these websites back to your website. You're going to be able to have it on YouTube. You can monetize it there. You can get advertisers to advertise on your podcast. You could get sponsors to advertise. There's just all these magical things about podcasting that when you do it right, it can generate you great income and it can grow your business, and you can do it a couple hours a month and have it just run in the background of your life while doing something you love to do. And for me, that's why I love podcasting, because I love to talk to individuals. I love to build those relationships and have those connections. And podcasting is the most authentic way I see of doing that. And then, you can get your social media person or whoever to kind of cut up the videos and turn them into social media posts so that you're covering all the bases. Neil Patel calls it omni-channel, where it's kind of like you're on everything and it all kind of feeds into itself. But with podcasting kind of in the center for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And Calan, I'm also curious to ask you why you relish sort of impacting the lives of people. And when you look at your own life, my friend, what brings you the most joy in life?
Okay, well, I have to say, I really love figuring out puzzles. I've always loved puzzles since I was a kid. And I kind of see people and our lives as like a giant puzzle, if that makes sense. And the life I've lived, I figured out a lot of pieces to my puzzle. Like I figured out this podcasting piece to my puzzle. I know how to do it well. I know how to do it so that it does it efficiently, so that it supports your business, so that it grows your online presence and it helps your SEO. I figured out this piece of the puzzle. And with helping others, if I can then help them figure out their pieces of the puzzle that they're missing, that brings me joy, because that excites me to be able to help somebody else. Like, we're social people, we're social creatures. I like to help others. I hope, and I think most people like to help others, that's kind of like what life is overall. And so by me then being like, hey, I figured out this piece of the puzzle, let me help you figure out that piece of the puzzle so that I can speed up your process, so that you can go through it, figure out that piece of the puzzle, and it leads to more joy for you, and it leads to you being able to enjoy your life more. Why wouldn't I do that? And so it's kind of like for selfish reasons, because it feeds me, that I get to help other people figure out those pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's for every person, every walk of life, whatever your thing is. And that's what's so exciting and so special about humanity, is like, we're all so different. We all have different interests. We all have different wants and needs and desires, but everybody's puzzle pieces in some way will kind of fit together when you meet those right people. And going to the conference we met at, that was one of my pieces, sliding in and meeting a bunch of other puzzle pieces to help each other. And we brought more joy to each other. And so that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to all of that and impacting people and changing lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And Calan, I'm also fascinated to ask you about the concept of, hope, and what brings you the most sort of hope for the future in terms of binding us together instead of creating more division. So when you think about your heartbeat of hope, what do you think of? What comes to mind when you think about the prospect of building more hope in your life and in society in general?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is love is louder. And that just kind of popped in because it's true. Like, I used to be a very angry person when I was young, just through the experiences I'd gone through, my parents' divorce, and just I had felt very alone and left out, and like nobody cared about me, and that I didn't matter. And I took and I was also gay and hiding it and in the closet and everything. And so I took a lot of that, and I was just so angry. And that never led me anywhere, and that never helped anything. And it just made things worse. And I think what really shifted, first coming out of the closet, changed a lot of that. I no longer carried that weight on my shoulders. And like, even though it was the scariest thing I'd ever done in my life at that point, it just, to be able to be myself in my own skin, I was just like, oh, now I can start actually living my life and like just not carrying that weight. That was a huge kind of a thing. But then I also started doing like my own personal development work, and I just learned so many teachings and lessons that just made sense to me, that, like Brene Brown says, like things like her definition of shame is, if you feel shame, that's you believing you are wrong. Whereas if you feel guilt, that means you understand that you did something wrong, but you in yourself are not wrong. And so I was carrying a lot of shame in me because I'd been taught by the world that I was wrong. As a gay man, I was wrong. I was the problem. But when I learned the difference that I was not wrong, and nor did I even do anything wrong, I could kind of take that and put it outside of me. Or even when, we screw up, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We're all messy. I say crap all the time. I upset people. Everybody does it. To give myself that grace of saying that I am not a bad person inside. I've just stepped out of alignment in this moment, and to feel guilt about it, not to feel shame about it, understanding the language around it and really going through that. And that I've been doing personal development work since like 2005. Like, it's been a long journey. And just allowing myself to learn and grow has been such an instrumental part of me growing as a human and as an individual. The world doesn't owe me anything. I used to think that the world owed me something just because I was born. And innately, as a human being, yes, you are owed living and having your experience. and to experience joy and all the emotions in that, but learning that I still had to show up for myself. I still had to show up for the work. I still had to show up and do it. But the more that I did that, the more I showed the universe that I was ready for the next step, that I was ready for all of these other things. All of these things kind of play into your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Colin, I'm going to end our conversation with a two-part question, my friend. We just finished celebrating Canada Day the other day, and today when we're recording this, it's the 4th of July for our American friends. So tell me about what's your favorite part about being authentically Canadian? And then finally, when you look at your own personal and professional life, how do you want your legacy to be defined?
Okay, so Canadian. That was the first part, right? Being authentically Canadian.
You got it.
Okay. Well, I've been blessed and worked my butt off to live in many cities around the world, and one of those cities was Dubai for 5 years, and I think I was the most proud over there because no matter where I've been in the world, people do tend to love Canadians because we are polite. Not saying we're perfect. By all means, we can be shitty people. But overall, we are known to be polite people. And I believe we are genuinely good, polite people and nice people. Not polite because we have to be, but polite because we know that it makes people feel good and we want to make people feel good. But when I was over in Dubai, there were so many cultures that I worked with. And I always just had so many people. It was always like people always loved Canadians. There was never people who hated Canadians. And that made me really proud because it wasn't just a specific culture that said it. It was everybody, because everybody understood and believed that in Canada, again, we are very much not perfect, but we're trying and we're working on doing the work to make sure everybody feels included, to make sure that this is an inclusive country, to make sure this is an inclusive place. And that's what this country was born and raised off of. I might be 5th generation Canadian, but I didn't originate here. And so everybody who's here came from somewhere else, unless you're an Indigenous person. And so being able to take all that and bring it together and understand that we as a collective make this country amazing and make it great, and that we can learn from the past and that we can embrace change. There's pushback and there's definitely conservatives and people who don't love change just as much as there is in the US and other places. But I think for the most part, we can look at our history, maybe not on the grand scale of politically, but as a people, as a culture, as communities, we have the capacity to look on our past with eyes of consciousness and awareness and a true, genuine desire to change and to grow and to learn from those mistakes in the past and to not try and just hide them and pretend that they weren't there. At least the people I know that I keep in my world and that I keep in my life. Like everybody on Canada Day, I saw a lot of my photos. People were out and celebrating Canada Day everywhere, but a lot of them were wearing orange shirts and making sure that, the Indigenous histories are part of what we are now growing and learning about and changing that narrative. And so to be able to be Canadian and to be proud to be Canadian, we're embracing everything and we're doing our best to learn and to grow through that. And we're not just turning a blind eye. Not everybody, but like my personal experience and a lot of the people around me, we are genuinely trying to do our best to do that. And that makes me really proud. And the last part, what do I hope? It was my legacy, my professional kind of legacy.
Professional and personal legacy. Yeah. How do you hope that will be defined in your life?
Well, I mean, I don't really think I have a say in that per se. I think that that's kind of up to everybody else. But what I do hope is that I hope I'm remembered for how I made people feel. And hopefully that feeling is a good one and one full of fondness. So that's what I hope. I don't really care in what regard that is, whether that's a friend or a partner or in business. I just hope that the feeling I make people feel when they're around me is one of kindness and goodness and happiness and joy, and that is what they take with them, and that is what they remember. Because to me, that is a lot of what I see success as. Wherever I'm going to go in business, it's going to be what it's going to be. But being able to bring joy to people's life in a genuine level, that to me is one of the most successful things you can do, is to be that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Callan, tell me if people want to get connected with you or the work that you do from a business perspective, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way is to go to calanbreckon.com. So that's CalanBreckon.com. And on my website, you can find everything you need to know about me. You can go and check out my new course on how to become an entrepreneur. That's on the course page, and my contact is on there, my about me, everything else is on there. And in September, I'm going to be launching a new podcast called the Business Gay Podcast, because I've not seen any LGBTQ representation in regards to entrepreneurship, marketing, business when it comes to podcasts. It's all kind of the same people saying the same stuff, and I want to bring some representation up there. So I want to be on those charts. So you can look forward to that as well.
Absolutely. Well, my friend, it seems like you've got a lot on the go. I know that you are having a bit of a sabbatical for the next little while, so I want to wish you a good trip home back to Vancouver, my friend, and I want to thank you for the good work that you do to promote diversity, equity, and equality in business. And I want to thank you for your friendship and for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Kevin. I was so honored when you asked me, and I'm so glad that we got to spend this time together and got to have our chat and have fun when we did it.